They tried to kill him, but he refused to die. Deep in the cold lands of Russia, in a small, forgotten village, a boy was born, poor, uneducated, unknown. His name was Rasputin, Grigory Rasputin. At first, there was nothing special about him, no power, no status, no future. But as he grew older, people started noticing something strange. He was different, very different. Some said he had a connection to something beyond this world. Others believed he was dangerous. Rasputin claimed he could heal people. He said he could see things others couldn't. And sometimes, his predictions came true. Villagers were confused. Some followed him. Others feared him, because no one could explain how a simple man had such influence. But Rasputin wanted more. He didn't want to stay in that small village. He believed he was meant for something bigger, something powerful, and that belief would take him to the highest level of power in Russia. He was just a poor man, but he walked into a royal palace. Rasputin left his village behind, traveling across Russia, from town to town, spreading his name. His reputation grew. People called him a holy man, a healer, a mystic, but not everyone believed him. Some called him a fraud, a liar, a manipulator, but none of that stopped him, because soon his name reached the royal palace, the home of Nicholas II of Russia and his wife, Alexandra Feodorovna. The royal family had a secret, a dangerous one. Their son was sick, very sick, a disease no one could cure. They had tried everything, doctors, medicine, nothing worked. Then someone suggested Rasputin. At first, they were unsure. How could a poor, mysterious man succeed where doctors failed? But they had no choice. They invited him to the palace, and that moment changed everything, because what Rasputin did next was something no one could explain. And from that moment, he wasn't just a man anymore. He became the most powerful figure behind the throne. Doctors failed, but he didn't. The royal palace was silent. Fear filled every corner. The young prince was dying. No doctor could help him. No medicine worked. Hope was fading. Then Rasputin arrived, Grigory Rasputin, a man with no medical training, no royal background, nothing except belief. He walked into the room calmly. Everyone watched. Doubt, fear, confusion. Rasputin didn't panic. He didn't rush. He simply sat beside the prince, closed his eyes, and began to pray. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Then something strange. The prince's condition started to improve. His breathing slowed, his pain reduced, and slowly, he became stable. The room was in shock. How was this possible? Doctors couldn't explain it. No one could. But one thing was clear. Rasputin had done something no one else could. And from that moment, everything changed. He saved the prince. Now he controlled the empire. After that day, Rasputin was no longer just a visitor. He became essential. The royal family trusted him completely, especially the empress, Alexandra Feodorovna. She believed Rasputin was sent by God to protect her son, to guide the empire. And because of that, Rasputin gained something dangerous: influence. He began advising the royal family, not just on personal matters, but on politics, decisions, power, and slowly, the empire started changing. But not everyone was happy. Many nobles hated him. They saw him as a fraud, a manipulator, a man who had no right to control the throne. But no one could stop him, because as long as the prince was alive, Rasputin was untouchable. He had become the most powerful man in Russia without ever being king. But power like this always creates enemies, and soon those enemies would make a move, one that would turn this story into something dark. He had power, but now everyone hated him. Rasputin's influence kept growing. Inside the palace, he was trusted, but outside, he was feared. Rumors spread across Russia. People said he was corrupt, immoral, dangerous. They whispered about his behavior, his control over the royal family, and how one man was shaping the future of an entire empire. Nobles were furious. Leaders were angry. Even the public started turning against him because they believed one thing: Rasputin was destroying Russia, Grigory Rasputin. But despite all the hate, no one could remove him. Why? Because the Empress protected him, Alexandra Feodorovna. As long as she trusted him, he was untouchable. So his enemies realized something. If they couldn't remove him from power, they would have to remove him completely. And they began planning, a plan so dark, it would become one of the most shocking stories in history. They poisoned him, but he didn't die. One cold night, Rasputin was invited to a palace by people he trusted. But this was no friendly meeting. It was a trap. Among the conspirators was Felix Yusupov, a man determined to end Rasputin's influence. They prepared a deadly plan: poison, hidden inside food and drink, enough to kill a man instantly. Rasputin arrived, calm, unaware. He sat down, ate the food, drank the wine. The poison entered his body. Everyone waited. Seconds passed, minutes passed. Nothing happened. Rasputin didn't fall, didn't weaken, didn't die. Instead, he kept talking, kept moving, like nothing had happened. The conspirators were in shock. How was this possible? The poison was enough to kill anyone, but Rasputin was still alive. That's when fear began, because now, this wasn't just a plan anymore. This felt like something else, something unnatural, and they realized if poison couldn't stop him, they would have to try something else, something more violent. And what happened next was even more unbelievable. Poison didn't work, so they tried bullets. The conspirators were terrified. Poison had failed. Rasputin was still alive, still standing, still talking. It made no sense. Panic started to rise. They realized this man wasn't normal, so they made a decision. If poison couldn't kill him, they would use force. Felix Yusupov picked up a gun. His hands were shaking, but he had no choice. He aimed and fired. The bullet hit Rasputin. He collapsed. Finally, it was over, or so they thought. Moments later, something horrifying happened. Rasputin moved, slowly. He opened his eyes and stood up, alive, again. The men froze in fear. This was impossible. A man shot at close range should not survive. But Rasputin wasn't just surviving. He was coming toward them. They panicked. More shots were fired, again and again, until finally, he fell. This time, not moving, silent, still. But the fear didn't go away, because what they had just seen didn't feel human. They killed him. But his story refused to die. The conspirators weren't taking any chances, not after what they had seen. They wrapped Rasputin's body and took it away, far from the palace, far from anyone who could find him. In the freezing night, they threw his body into icy water, hoping this would be the end. And finally, it was. Grigory Rasputin was dead, but the story didn't end there, because when his body was found later, something shocking was discovered. There were signs that he might have still been alive when he entered the water, that he didn't die from poison or even from bullets, but from the cold, from drowning. And that detail changed everything, because it meant even after poison, even after being shot, he was still alive, long enough to fight for survival. And that's what made Rasputin a legend, a mystery, a man no one could explain. They tried to erase him, to destroy his influence, but instead, they created something else, a story so unbelievable, it still lives on today.